pretty much is just something for people to look up news and celebrities for. Really, it's just silly. Hey, folks, this is day one of our U.S. government course for the semester, and it is it's January the 5th, 2021. Hope you had a good Christmas break. The notes that we're going to go over today are up on the Google Classroom, and they're titled 7 Principles of the Constitution. So that's how we're going to start off this course. Is we're going to talk about the principles of U.S. government. And of course, a lot of this course is going to be, it's going to be a mix between how things work, how the system works in U.S. government, but also like what are some of the philosophical principles behind it. The cool thing about U.S. government is that it has philosophical structures behind it, but they're not super stupid complicated. The founders were really, really smart in that they were able to explain the ideas behind it in a way to make the farmers sign onto it and ratify the thing. So Don't worry, it's not like crazy. That doesn't mean it's bad. What it means is that it's universal. It means that it's basic in a good way. Kind of like clean water is basic and it's good for you.
Until the whiskey rebellion.
Yeah, well, they didn't. There was reasons behind that, right? Like I'm sympathetic to the rebels. Honestly, they would have destroyed everything, but I'm sympathetic to them. But because they really got a bad bargain, quite a bit. But that's maybe we'll get to that. I don't know. All right, so your title is 7 Principles of the Constitution. Make sure you do not put this on your warm-up page because then you're just going to mess your notes up. So the first thing, you might remember these from 8th grade, you might not. First is popular sovereignty. So what's sovereignty mean? What's a sovereign?
Independent nation.
Yeah. Like if I was in the medieval days and if I called someone my sovereign, who would I be talking about?
Your king.
Your king, right?
Or someone who owns
a slave.
Someone who owns the fief that you live on.
Yeah. Your sovereign is somebody who has all the political powers. So they're saying the populace, the people have sovereignty. Definition: the belief that people can and should govern themselves. So the people rule. Yeah, but that doesn't mean direct rule. It just means we're the source of power. And you'll find that the Bill of Rights and the Constitution all revolve around this idea. So that the people are the sovereign. That means ideally, the government is made of public servants, not public sovereigns.
Precisely.
They're the servants of you, the people who are supposed to be in charge.
So government works for us.
Yeah, but not like. But remember, we're an egalitarian society, so we don't like whip the mayor, to make him act.
That'd be
right.
so dope, bro.
Fun fact.
Hey Trump, do this for me, boy.
The daily mayor.
Fun fact. Anytime who's over the age of 18 can run for mayor of White House.
Nice. Do it.
You can probably win because nobody wants to do that. Because there's no pay, there's no benefits.
What is it?
All you get is just saying that you were mayor of White House.
I want to do it.
You don't get no pay.
I want to do it.
Also, the mayor of Thailand, surprisingly enough.
I want to be the mayor of
Thailand. Not get
Thailand.
paid. There's no benefits.
There's a mayor in town.
Yeah, that's what
I was gonna say,
There is.
I've met a mayor, but
it's an important position. I mean, especially like a town this size. I mean, really,
it's a thankless job, though.
the people who get paid well for the city, I think, are like the city planners and stuff like that, because they'll actually like bargain with them for how much they get paid and stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't think mayors get better anymore. I think they do because of how local stuff was.
Well, the thing is about Texas is we have a history of having really city councils having the power over our cities, the mayors. Really, the only city that's historically had a super strong mayorship, I think, was Galveston. It was Galveston, yeah, after the hurricane of what, 1900. Yeah, then they rebuilt the city.
The one that hit Galveston?
Man, Galveston,
Yeah.
just remember, Galveston never catch a break in the early 1900s. First, they got hit by a hurricane. Then they were the starting point of the Black Plague. in the 1920s. I mean, they never catch a break.
Hey, so here's an example. People can run for office, campaign for individuals who run, or protest decisions made by others. Rule is not passed down based on bloodline or military coup. ... So now the British would disagree. They'd say, "Hey, you had a military coup." So
You know how
We had a military coup.
You know Emperor Nero, the guy who played a fiddle while
Yeah.
burned and had Christians put on flaming spikes and showed it as guests.
I've read a few books of that.
Yeah, and well, the thing about Emperor Nero is that he was going to be outcast because the military decided to throw a coup.
Mhm.
And by the time they got to the palace, Nero was already dead.
Yeah,
And
Nero.
so the military leader in charge was like, "Well, I guess you're emperor now." He's like, "Wait, what?" So
Who was it?
the first emperor of the 5 great emperors, Emperor Galba.
Yeah, when Nero, it was. I think it was the author. Gosh, what was his name? Yeah, I got one book over here, and yeah, he was talking about when Nero was fleeing, like he's just like a total coward. Like he was saying, he fled with his like this boy he married and all this other stuff, and he was like trying not to die.
A boy he married?
Yeah, Nero. Yeah.
Fun fact,
I didn't know Nero had a boyfriend.
Nero had a
was
lot.
jacked up. Didn't he like have the kids like cut off
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, he drowned his own mother, and it was
he'd light up his lawn with like burning Christians.
Yeah.
So
That would dip him his heart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then he'd be
messed
like,
Yeah.
don't even like
He went to the Olympics and he won. He won every event he got in because they were scared he'd kill them.
yeah. So Nero honestly just has like a
You want to know
swell
why?
It was crazy.
Emperor-
It's basically the movie Dictator.
No,
Okay, so whenever his king lover died, he had 2,000
Straight up.
statues of him built all over Rome, and you can
Yeah.
still find pieces of it today.
Yeah, I forgot the guy's name. But
I think it
yeah.
was like Actius or something like that.
Incredibly.
honestly, I want to meet Nero so
Hey,
bad.
moving right along. So,
I just want to ask him like why.
all right. So, but hey, yeah. I mean, like Rome happened. All right. So, republicanism definition: people vote for people to represent their views in government. Hey, this is something we inherited from, well, at least the idea from Rome. Really, though, you might say the founders also, they didn't just look at Rome. They also looked at they looked at one thing, of course, like Italian examples, places. So like places like Florence had like republic periods. Now France hadn't had a republic yet, but you could find that some of the city states in like the Netherlands and stuff like that had pretty successful cities that were republics, right? But they weren't that large. But the idea when the founders were founding America, they couldn't view into the future how America would expand to the size it was. They didn't know how big the continent was, for one. And but republicanism was the best way they could figure out how to have a national government that was rather handoffish because they thought it was going to get bigger, but also still be fair, right? You could send representatives down there to represent people, but everybody was too far away to have any like day-to-day dealings with the federal government.
That's why old republics and like Rome, for instance, they fell apart very easily because they're spread way too thin.
Well,
whenever Rome was like all the way from Britain all the way to Egypt, from Gibraltar to like Israel, all these places, the problem was that they're spread way too thin, and they had these huge roads built, but that costs a lot.
there's a lot of historians who agree with that assessment. Why Rome?
I disagree.
But they don't think it was because it was a Republican form of government. They didn't think any form of government could
Yeah,
manage
no
to
form
do
of
it.
government I'd ever stand that size. That size of just spread.
Because it could have been a
What do
monarchy
you-
and
what
it
do you
still would
mean
have
by
same
spread?
communication problems and stuff.
And they have a huge military, but just not big enough and not fast enough to deal with problems.
And if you remember in ninth grade, there's a lot of other reasons too. Culturally, they lost a cultural battle. They inherited so many barbarian tribes in Rome that gained full citizenship rights, but didn't care about
Ken, what
Rome.
the heck, dude?
Their economy was based on expansion, and so when they weren't expanding, they didn't really have a functioning economy anymore.
That's what I'm saying.
It pretty much felt because they pretty much had the entire Mediterranean developed, but they couldn't utilize it because there were too many different cultures.
That's
Because you got people from the Iberians, and you got the Jews, and you got the Egyptians, and you got the Grecians.
That's why
and you got the British, you got the
multiculturalism-
Scottish, you got the Gauls.
But I mean,
Um,
another reason
I
too
Did you
is
not
that
play Assassin's
their
Creed?
government
did you
grew
not
so
play
big and their
Assassin's Creed
inflation got so bad. The only people who could make enough money to eat were essentially bureaucrats towards the end of the Roman Empire. And so, like, people, it basically destroyed their industries, destroyed their trade, and the peasants essentially started seeing the birth of serfdom, where they had to like get attached to these potentates, these really big landowners who'd become nobility. And so there you had a case, and that's something that was going to stick with Byzantium, is that the government, like pretty much the only people who were doing work for the Byzantine government, like regular business people didn't really know.
That makes me think of the banana republics in the 1900s, whenever
Yes, sir.
United Fruit Company and all of them.
Wait, 1900?
I've heard of it.
The banana republics, like United Fruit Company, which they became Dole, Peter Banana, and all those like banana companies.
Oh,
They pretty much claimed all of Guatemala, Honduras, and they had the United
Well,
States.
that's still the case in a lot of South American countries today. I mean, the only way you can get something done is if you got friends like in a government position. You know, if you want your electricity turned on to your house, you're either going to be on like a 6-month waiting list, or you're going to have a friend down at the Bureau of Electricity Management do something for you. So I mean, yeah, it's just one of those things.
If you didn't have a direct share in the bananas,
Mhm.
like if you didn't have like some kind of managerial position, or you didn't, it's like
What about the
you were
44%?
99%, and you were just you got like 4 wages, and you had like no food. You worked on land that wasn't even yours.
Okay. I could see that. Hey, folks. All right. So here's our example for republicanism. You can't have the whole population vote on everything, so you vote on people who share similar beliefs and allow them to vote. Now, some people have made the modern argument that thanks to smartphones, you could have popular votes on lawmaking.
It's really easy to manipulate.
Okay, so you could have the hackers. In fact, that reminds me, I remember hearing the other day, like especially about like cell phone hacking for swatting, right? So you'll have guys like all the way in like the Ukraine, like hack somebody's phone in Chicago, and they'll use their phone to call in like a crazy thing to the cops to have them swat the house, and then they'll turn on the cell phone camera to try to watch it. And so, which is extremely
Those
wicked because
Ukrainians are
people
wild,
die like
though.
that. Oh, it'll just be anywhere, right?
That happens a lot. Like they use like big streamers
Mhm.
on like YouTube.
Oh yeah. You'll hear about the Call of Duty guys swatting each other.
Swat their house. Somebody's actually died from it.
Yeah, and the guy who called it, he's in prison. So because he got some poor kid killed, you know. All right, so this goes back to popular sovereignty though, because people still have the power because we are the ones who are supposed to, you know, have direct election of senators, representatives. Now, when the Constitution was written, we didn't have direct election of senators. The states chose those. Because the founders intended the states to have, because the United States to be a collection of states, right? Not a collection of people. The House of Representatives represented the people. The senators represented the states. That's different now. Now we popularly vote for all of them. All right. The next phrase is federalism. Federal. So power is shared by the state and federal government. The federal government is our central government, right? So you can think of it as our national government. So it's the government of the whole nation. It has certain powers. The states have other powers. Joey. And so the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that all things not listed within the Constitution are for the states or the people. And so the states are supposed to, if you take that literally, have a lot of things that they can do. And they do have a lot of things they do. It's the states that run education and all of other stuff like that. Road maintenance, day-to-day law enforcement.
Fruit salad.
So, in our system, the national government does have government authority. But states also have a lot to say in what goes on as well. So, of course, the national government is supposed to come with a little disclaimer. They have ultimate authority according to what they're supposed to do in the Constitution. So, for things like printing money, yes, that's the federal government's job. It's not the state government's job. States aren't supposed to make their own money. If they do it, that's in trouble. Powers for the national government equal delegated powers. Powers for the state governments are what we call reserve powers.
Fun fact, right? Sorry, but right after the Texas,
You have a fan.
right after the Texas joining of like the Confederacy, they had people in Texas were like,
Wait, we
I don't care if we
joined the
join
Confederacy?
anywhere. I'm still going to use the Texas dollar. And people are like, okay, fine. We're going to cut every single dollar,
Yes.
Texas dollars, right in the middle, so you can't use it that well.
Mm,
And if you find any like Texas dollars nowadays, you'll find that they're all cut.
I know.
Like none of them are no longer.
Are they like Texas Republic dollars or what?
Yeah, and they're actually really rare.
I got a Texas Republic flag for Christmas. It's so clean.
They're
Big
cut
native
right in the middle.
flag.
The big tags. So they're not valuable anymore.
That's freaking damn.
Wait, don't
It is very sad.
And people are still using them,
That's
and
my
they're like,
flag.
hey, I trust this currency. I don't trust that currency.
Mm.
Michael, those Cheetos are
That's
good.
why in certain countries it's hard to
Ooh, can I
interrupt
have some?
cheap currency. So it's European Union.
Yes.
That's why the third year like they had, because
When you got
A, they got rid of the
Cheetos.
pound, which they've used for almost 1,000 years, or B, they switched over to euro within a year.
Oh yeah, I was in Italy during when they adopted the euro, and like yeah, they gave us like a couple years. You could still use the lira, but whenever you spent it, businesses and people were encouraged to take it to the bank to switch it over to euros. And so, but it was a lot easier to calculate with euros because euros is closer to the dollar, and it took 2,000 lira to equal a dollar. So whenever I'd see a price, I'd be like, "Oh, that looks like a lot. Oh, how much is that in dollars?" And I had to think. But with euros, it was almost 1-to-1 at first.
I actually haven't looked through my coin collection. I found some francs. And I even found Russian pennies,
Nice.
which is, it's like a German penny from
That's my
1930.
only thing. It helps on that.
All right. So if you ever find yourself in Russia, you can buy some chiclets.
Germany.
No, Germany. But then you won't. All right, moving on. Oh yeah, powers shared between the national and the state are called concurrent powers. So separation of powers is our next one. And of course, like we said, it's a federal system. So it's a federal system, but it's not only divided between the national and the state government, but even our national government. And we're going to talk about why this is later when we talk about some of the philosophies that were behind some of those. So, definition. The federal government is divided into 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. So the executive is our presidency, and of course, it's more than that today. The legislative, of course, that's the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the judicial, which is the Supreme Court, and then the federal courts underneath them. This system prevents any one branch from gaining too much power and turning the country towards tyranny. So we're going to hear a lot about tyranny when we talk about the Federalist Papers, because tyranny can come in many, many forms we're going to find.
Especially
But it's always bad. Well, you could say that communism is a system that could bring on different kinds of tyranny. So, Charles Montesquieu, yeah, he's a French philosopher we know as philosophe, or a philosophe from the Enlightenment. And he came up with this idea of separation of powers. He came up with other ideas as far as governments as well. He was during the high time of divine monarchs in France. There was a lot of these rich, very highly educated nobles who would go to these salons, and they would have these essentially talk parties where they would drink a little and talk about high-minded ideas and stuff like that. And one of the topics was always about how they disliked the government and thought that there would be better ideas for it to be. Well, the cool thing is they had a lot of good ideas. bad thing is when they finally had a revolution, most of these people wound up dying. So that's the thing. Revolutions usually kill their children. Except the U.S. Revolution. It's kind of like one of the weird.
We're the good guys.
outliers.
We're the good guys, Mr. Weiner.
Well, you could say that it wasn't just a revolution. It wasn't just a civil war, but it's kind of like a war against a foreign power in some ways.
But they're so far away that we don't
Yeah.
I think,
The British eventually
in
just stopped
conclusion,
Canada.
America
Kind of
is
why
the
we
good
won.
And because we won, we kind of evicted all the British supporters. So there wasn't a lot of unrest after the war was over. We just got rid of all of those pesky
Rebels of the rebels.
rebels of the rebels, essentially. I mean, we didn't put them in concentration camps, though, so that's pretty good.
That's nice.
That was fun.
That was good. We didn't put them in guillotines.
What did we do?
We didn't tar feather them, but we didn't put them in guilt.
We put them on boats in Canada.
To be fair, tarring and feathering is pretty brutal.
It's a torturous death. Yes, you can. I hope.
But they didn't die.
Right ahead.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Not immediately.
I mean, and skin burn, red, and everything.
Yeah, usually people who were tarred and feathered wind up dying of shock. So there you were, stripped naked, tarred, feathered, might be put on the back of a donkey, or you're whipped until you ran out of town, and then you just laid down in a ditch and died of shock. So that's pretty bad. Some people did live through it, but they would just have like total body scars the rest of their lives.
It's kind
Well,
of
how does tar and feather even work?
Well, tar,
Boiling
they
hot
would boil it,
tar.
right? And so then they would paste you in this boiling stuff, and they'd just throw feathers on you, and the feathers would stick in the tar, kind of like glue. And so just having that super boiling hot stuff all over your skin would just kind of cook into it, and so it couldn't
I
go
love
off.
my skin cook.
Could you live with that on?
You could. I mean, I think there's cases of people living through it, but usually it'd kill you. It's just, it's kind of like, it's just, I guess it was a comical way to burn someone to death. That makes sense.
It's kind of dope. Oh, dude.
As sick as that sounds.
Get your
All right.
greasy hands off my pen.
Next one,
Yeah.
checks and balances. So checks and balances is supposed to be the way that the three branches of government were in such distrustful competition with one another as they kept one another from breaking the rules. So definition, each of the three branches of government had a check on the other two branches. This balances power between the three, ensuring that none of the branches seizes control. Example, federal judges are nominated by the president, but have to be approved by Congress. Bills must be passed by both houses, that's the House of Representatives and the Senate, signed by the president, but they can be challenged in the courts. Yes, and of course vetoed by president. And of course, presidents can be kicked out of office by the legislature as well, provided that it goes through both the House and the Senate.
This recently happened actually, and there's been a lot of back and forth.
Just the House. If it goes only through the House, it's basically just like a stop it. We don't like you very much. But if it takes the Senate to kick them out.
But there was recently, the 600 check. It was a 900.
Oh, the veto. Oh yeah, veto override. Yeah,
And there was a
Bless you.
$900 billion check. You get $713 billion into other countries. $23 million to Pakistani gender studies. $50 million to
Yeah, we're
Syria.
that was gender
Why do we Pakistan's gender
studies?
I can almost guarantee you.
You paid that
I
much to
can,
capture.
I can almost guarantee you that the money will not go to the
That's what I was thinking. I was
programs.
like, it's going straight to a Pakistani journal's pocket.
It's
Gender
it's
studies
going
like
to.
it's
It usually
You paid that
money
much.
goes to
One,
organizations like
two.
that.
Okay,
it
we're
doesn't
done.
even make it to the
Rest is
organization.
my pocket.
Heads get it, and then they kind of gift it to whoever they want to after that. It's
And
a way to
I think
filter money.
10 million was going to studying invasive fish in the Gulf of Mexico that was causing no harm.
What does this have to do with COVID-19?
I think tons of money was
Hey,
going. I think tons
y'all
of money was
sleeping on
being siphoned
Pakistan?
into
I think you meant
the
life.
defense budget once more. I think around 50 billion was going to Syria, not Syrian efforts, but just to Syria.
Well, there's also legislative things in it, like harsher penalties for posting things that are copyrighted. So if you upload videos into like, let's say you want to,
Oh yeah, the DMCA Act and pretty much.
even memes are talking about could face heavy fines and penalties
What
if
the
it's
hell
copyrighted.
felonies charges?
Yeah.
Or memes.
Or if you want to post it, like some people post like Disney movies or something on YouTube before it gets pulled down, talking about getting in trouble for that. So. I'm sorry, Bryce, can you get your hand up?
Yeah. I thought,
Yeah.
alright, so, about the whole gender studies. Wouldn't that just be like social?
Again, probably not going to gender
Well,
studies.
yeah, like-
That
That I don't know. I don't know what the details
The,
are.
the rest of the money we go to.
It's just like.
to all-
Yeah.
I could bet all my money
favor real quick.
that over half the population can't point out Syria before. If I just swipe on somebody random on the street, where's Syria on this map?
Well, I can guarantee
There's
you
no borders map, it's just a map.
that kind of money, like for one, Pakistan's basically, most of those towns are like little theocracies, and I kind of doubt that they're going to welcome that kind of thing. No, whenever I hear about money going to big programs and stuff like that, I usually think that it's just going to get kind of, like a lot of times whenever they donate a lot of federal money to aid, things like that, you find out the organization doesn't get the money, just people who run the organizations. And then sometimes they'll make a lot of political contributions. So it's almost a way of laundering money.
And pretty much, I'm like, hold up, what is this? On Twitter, of all places, he's like, oh, let me read this out real quick.
Yeah.
Pulls out the 7,000-page legislation that nobody read. It went through both houses because nobody read it.
It was an Omnibus Bill, which means that you have multiple bills put together. And so, yeah, it was kind of like, you glued like 5 Bibles together or something.
Nobody wanted to read it, and nobody did. Like, everybody just passed it because it said stimulus check. Oh, okay. Without actually reading what's inside of it. Once Trump actually read what's inside of it, the entire Democratic Party went with the 2,000 stimulus instead of 600. And then Mitch McConnell, the turtle himself.
Okay, so limited government definition. Everybody has to follow the same laws, even members of the government. So it is the law that limits the government. And the Constitution, the supreme law, is supposed to be the supreme limit on the government. If a representative committed a crime, he or she would face trial just like anybody else. This goes back to we're an egalitarian society. All have equal protection, but also equal weight under the law. Oops. I think we got one more, and then we'll be done for today.
I think all of them move to the White House. So they're gonna have for mayor, you can all vote for mayor.
I have a question. Can we watch the bill reading? It's actually like a 2-minute video. It's like
The what?
It's pretty much it's pretty much just Donald Trump reading all the major expenses in the bill.
Oh, yeah.
600. That's the original video. It's like 2 minutes and like 30 seconds of him just reading the actual bill.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was dumb.
I wonder if a lot of high school students got stimulus checks.
No,
No,
I thought I was
we're
going to, but I didn't.
we're in like the ballpark between.
What if you're 18 and
Non-existing
employed?
So how it worked is it went off of
Last year's income tax?
yes.
Ah.
So even if you had a job, right,
Mm.
and you did all that, like me,
Mm-hmm.
since I was a dependent last year, and so
So-
like this year, I don't get my own
So we
stimulus.
don't
You would have had to
exist
been
to the government.
emancipated.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Teenagers exist to the government when it helps them make money.
Yeah,
Facts.
Okay,
That's
that makes
facts.
okay. I
That's
could
facts.
see that.
Straight facts, no printer.
I would say that for a lot of things. Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
can we watch
That's
the bill reading? It's really short.
Sure, I'll look at it if you want. But we're going to do one more term after this. And then we come back Thursday, we'll do a little more. Next week, I'll assign y'all a little something to read. We're probably going to do an analysis of the Declaration of Independence, like I said, and then we're going to go back to the Federalist Papers. After that, and hopefully not too long from now, we'll have our books in. I would like to do our little book study right after spring break. It's a small book. It's like 150 pages.
What is spring break?
Spring.
Martin Day.
Hey, they just posted a new calendar, so
We don't have.
they updated our calendars.
Wait, I don't think we have this.
Oh, do we have-
Always it took Columbus Day.
We're supposed to have some half days now, but don't get too excited. They added days. They didn't take them away. So
Wait, are you talking about school calendar or the world calendar? Like, we're supposed to
school
have
calendar.
half
school
days. We already have half days.
Well, okay, so it didn't affect you that much. I don't know how it's gonna work though. But it's gonna be like the last week of school is gonna be turned to half days, cause, I don't know. some
Oh, that sucks, because then we're gonna have to deal with getting out with all the rest of the adults.
I would say just play it by ear. All right, last one for us, individual rights.
Too late.
Personal liberties. These are inalienable rights, guys and gals, and privileges that people are born with and cannot be taken away. And like I said before, I didn't say it for no reason. It's supposed to come from a higher power, because if it comes from a government, then a government may modify it or take it away. But if it comes from something like you are just born with it, then it's something that is inalienable.
Like
That means you
nat-
can't separate it.
You
Hair
call
color.
it your natural rights given to you by like nature.
Hair color, eye color.
No.
That's
Okay.
technically.
There's
You
a
can't
hard
argue.
Well,
That's
I
not
would
right.
say, it's no. Well, I would say that it's something beyond physical,
Yeah.
because I would say that it's something because
Yeah, choose what hair color and
because your liberty is something that's more important than you as a person. in
Yeah,
many
it's
ways.
like you're right.
Not everyone will go some
Little.
Dude, almost every single
Not
one is
your
fine.
eyes.
Oh, I see how weird right now.
I have the flash.
And there you have example Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments, were created specifically to ensure the rights of the people. And they actually didn't intend that to be in the Constitution. The founders, they were kind of like, okay, Constitution, here's how your government's going to work. But the people who fought in the revolution were like, wait, hold up a second. How does this protect us from you becoming another king? Okay, we'll come up with some protections.
Surprisingly, a lot of people were okay with George Washington being king.
Yeah,
King
Hamilton
Joe.
was famously known
Making
for
the
that.
king.
Ring, ding, 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 ding,
But,
ding.
Making the ring,
He
ring,
wasn't
ring, ring,
interested,
ring.
right? He wasn't interested.
No. We've already had enough
Play going
kings.
through
All right, folks, that's going to end our lecture for today. We'll meet back on Thursday and see you later.
That is big paw.
Can I get a?